Alright fellas, we just saw the return of Jake Paul and we definitely need to talk about this one. Jake Paul, the influencer turned boxer, just returned to the ring against Mike Perry. And of course it was meant to be Mike Tyson, but that was pushed back to November. Instead, we got the bare knuckle king of violence Mike Perry in a fight that could only be described as a complete mismatch. The matchup I think is the worst high profile matchup Jake has had. So I want to talk about the lead up, the fight itself, and what's in the future for both of these fighters. Especially as that post-fight interview had Jake Paul call out an unexpected name. So let's get right into it. This was Jake's return to the spotlight. Coming off two no-name punching bag sort of fights, the fight against Mike Perry was his return to the headlines. Mike Perry, of course a bare knuckle champion ex-UFC fighter, was chosen as an opponent by Jake mainly because of his ruthless reputation, yet also because of the clear advantages Jake had, but I'll talk about that more in a second. The build-up itself was nothing special. It's almost like every single one of these crossover boxing matches we see Jake involved in, the build-up is the exact same. To be honest, it's kind of weird. The face-to-faces bring nothing special. The weigh-ins and the face-offs are always almost identical, and then Jake screams at Ariel that he's going to beat his opponent. It's nothing new. I think what's the more interesting part of this build-up was the circumstances for the fight. So with Tyson pulling out of the bout and them having to reschedule, Paul and his team scrambled to find a replacement, that being Mike Perry. As I said in my last video, a huge factor in this fight was the huge weight difference between the two. Jake had to quickly drop weight after bulking to heavyweight for Tyson and cut to cruiserweight, while Mike Perry is a natural welterweight and had competed only as high as 185, so going up to 200 pounds is a huge jump. Leading into the fight night itself, the weight difference was heavily downplayed, especially by the boxing expert Ariel Helwani. I do respect his MMA journalism, but I don't know how he's weaseled his way into becoming a boxing analyst on official broadcasts. In this broadcast before the fight, he said how the weight differences really mean nothing. Yet once the fight started, he quickly questioned the size differences. Finally, all of a sudden, the realization from a man who's been there and been around them and seen the two all fight week. But just before talking about the Paul fight, the main fight on the undercard worth noting was the Ashton Silva fight. This fight has KO of the year potential. The fight against 16-0 little known US debutant Canadian Lucas Barty was seen as a stay busy fight, and it looked like this would be the case. Across the rounds, H2O was dominating and the fight looked like it was going to be a simple masterclass. Until a KO pretty much came out of nowhere and set the crowd alive, sleeping Silva in the same arena where his promoter slept Tyrone Woodley. It was a pretty graphic, brutal knockout which will definitely be in contention for knockout of the year. Now onto the main event. The second the fight started, you could see the differences in the two's size. I reckon Jake would have hydrated close to 220 when Mike was probably around the 196 which he weighed in at. Now, Jake's boxing to me at least seemed like it hadn't shown much improvement. He seems to have stagnated over the last few fights, yet he was far better than his opponent. Perry's style works fantastically for bare knuckle boxing, yet for actual boxing has no chance. He had little to no defense and wasn't utilizing sufficient head movement and was staying within Jake Paul's desired range. Did we really expect anything more from Perry? No, not really. There was hope that he might be able to land one punch, yet with the size difference, Perry's power was limited. Jake basically had his way with Perry, yet any punch Perry landed sent the crowd insane. Jake though was jabbing well, he was setting simple traps and keeping that distance and not allowing Perry to get him stuck in the corner. He really did everything he should. I think the fight should have been stopped way sooner than it actually was. The commentary of the fight was right, Perry was too tough for his own good. Although coming off a few week call up, Perry showing up and giving all he could should be applauded. Paul of course got that win through the stoppage in the 6th, yet I think this fight was a real mismatch, and Jake's team knew this. If this was back in the day when Jake was starting boxing versing the likes of Ben Askren, this would have been the perfect time to make this sort of fight. Now, Jake is far too advanced. For years now, he's been living like a pro boxer with the best trainers and sparring available to help him advance his craft. Fights against competitors from other combat sports with not a lot of actual boxing experience shouldn't even be considered, with the skill gap being now far too large. And that brings us to the debate of what's next for both of these fighters. For Mike Perry, I was gonna say he would just return to Bare Knuckle FC. Yet as I'm making this video, Conor McGregor has apparently fired him from the competition. As McGregor is now a part owner, he may be in the seat to make that decision. However, I'm not absolutely sure that that will happen, as do you really see other execs really giving up their biggest draw just because he lost to Jake Paul? I highly doubt it. I would say still most likely he will return to Bare Knuckle, but if not, he could explore more options as returning to MMA or even boxing people such as Dylan Dennis. But no matter what I think we'll see in the future, Mike Perry will return in some fringe competition somewhere, headlining an event in the near future. The more interesting options though lie in the future of Jake Paul. Of course, Jake's next opponent is confirmed to be Mike Tyson on Netflix in November, yet I still don't like this fight. I love Tyson, but he is pretty old. Many get caught up in the nostalgia and get fooled by the cut-up montages of him hitting the pads. But people forget, to the end of his career almost 2 decades ago, he wasn't the Mike Tyson you think about even then, losing to relative no-names. So in 2024, I would love to see Tyson dominate Paul, but I think we'll see the opposite, and it will be a pretty sad event. I'll cover it in more depth closer to the fight, but just in summary, I think Jake is susceptible to the peekaboo style, and I think a true pressure fighter would be Jake's kryptonite. Yet Tyson's peekaboo style started faulting in the 90s. One of the key factors of the style is you have to have extreme mobility. He needs the speed to pull it off effectively. With Tyson probably not being much heavier than 200 pounds on fight night, Jake will be heavier. The bloke now walks around with a cane half the time, and I think if Jake truly pushes forwards, Tyson's flat-footed square stance will walk him straight into trouble. His lack of mobility will be more of a problem for Tyson than Tyson's power will be for Jake. Don't be fooled by the Instagram montages. But also interestingly, Jake called out Alex Pereira. Now this is the only MMA competitor that I wouldn't mind to see Jake in the ring with now. He's Jake's size, has experience in kickboxing, and is good at striking. This would be a massive fight, but if it happens, it would be way later down the line. He's one of the faces of the UFC currently, and I don't think Dana will want to get into bed with Paul for a Mayweather-McGregor style match. As I said in my last video, through Paul connecting himself with huge legitimate names such as Tyson and Pereira, it makes him seem more legitimate to the casual fan and keeps him more relevant. This is why for the longest time he's gone after McGregor and Canelo, 2 fights which we'll probably never see happen. And after years of chasing, only tonight we saw an actual response from Conor McGregor properly acknowledging Jake Paul. Paul also did still mention wanting to become the Cruiserweight World Champion within 2 years, but as long as he keeps fighting UFC fighters and retirees, we will never see this come to any realm of possibility. Even more so if Usyk decides to move back down after the Fury matchup. Yet now I want to hear what you thought about the fight, Jake Paul, Mike Perry, and what lays in the future for the two. Let me know down below. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing, it helps the channel massively. But thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one.